Hello and welcome again. I'm just enjoying a nice American IPA, which is a kit beer from a local high street shop in the UK called The Range, and they do some wonderful kits. This is the American IPA, and I'll probably be doing a taste test sometime soon because it's really tasty. Oh, lovely and hoppy. Well, I was going to show you today me brewing, of course, the Australian bitter, Morgan's Australian bitter, to which I've added Kveik yeast. But unfortunately, I set the camera up and I started it playing, and I made the kit. It only takes about 20 minutes. And then when it comes to turn the the camera off, it had never started recording, so I didn't film it. But it's not a big loss because they're easy to make. You just basically dilute this with a brew enhancer in hot water and just top it up with cold water to 23 litres and job's done. So they're not big jobs, you haven't missed much, don't worry. But let me give you an update on how it's brewing with this Kveik yeast. So it was just after lunchtime on Saturday, and I brewed the kit and I topped it up to 23 litres, and I managed to get it to 38 degrees. I decided I wanted to drop it a little in temperature before I pitched the yeast, so I left it for a few hours. I went out and I watched football with the lad down at the pub, Euro 2020s. I came back, had something to eat, and about 6 o'clock I checked the temperature and it was down to 35. So I thought, great, pitched the yeast at 35. And my God, it just took off within a few hours. It was bubbling like mad. I set up my brew belt and my temperature controller, which I set to 31 degrees plus or minus half a degree. So at 30.5 degrees the belt will switch on, heat up. At 31.5 degrees it will turn off and it will cool down. So the beer would sit at a temperature between those two ranges, so on average 31 degrees. Well, it just took off. When I went to bed I had a look at it and it was still about 33 degrees temperature, so it was still dropping, 32, 33, but it was racing away. And this is only about 6 hours later, and it was just racing away. Of course, fermentation as well causes a lot of internal heat, so that will slow the rate of it cooling. I got up the next morning, and of course the first thing I wanted to do is check up on the Kveik. Well, the controller was showing 27 degrees. I'm thinking, how can it be? I've set it to heat up at 30.5, and then I noticed I hadn't plugged the belt in. So it had just been dropping overnight, and of course it's cooler in the evening as well, so it probably dropped a bit more rapidly. So I plugs it in and I heats it up. That said though, it must have been going a storm overnight, because I don't know if you can see, but that was my airlock, just absolutely bunged with foam and krausen and yeast. So it must have come all the way up and gone into the airlock. I've changed the airlock. I'm going to throw that away. I'm not going to try and clean it. They're only a couple of pounds. So where was I? Oh yes. So I plugs it in, and then I checks back a little bit later, and I could only get it to 29.8 degrees. That's as high as it would go. And of course the controller was constantly heating. It was telling the belt to always be on, but it wouldn't go above 29.8. So I gets out the brew mat and I puts the fermenter on top of the brew mat, and now we have a nice temperature of around about 31 degrees. So it was all a bit of a palaver on that first day, but I'm pleased to say I'll be bottling tonight. I think I've added an extra day on because of that problem with the temperature. I think if I could have kept it at 31 degrees from the off, I would have bottled last night. I think it would have taken a day off. But I took a hydrometer reading, and there's only another couple of points to drop. So it's at about 10, 12, 10, 11, and usually kits get down to about 10, 10. So I think there's only 1 or 2 more points to drop, and then I'm just going to be bottling tonight. And I'll be using a teaspoon of sugar in each bottle, and then I'll just let it condition or carb up in the bottles. But here's what's amazing. This is unbelievable. When we're just used to using normal conventional ale yeast like a Nottingham. As you always do, you've taken a hydrometer reading, you have a taste, don't you? It's a finished beer. The taste, I mean, there is absolutely nothing weird about the flavour, which is so unusual, because usually expect like a home brew taste so early on in fermentation, but it's nothing. It is completely clean. All I could taste were the malts, and there was a nice bitterness on the back end. Completely clean. And I found out the reason why. Because it's unheard of when you use a normal yeast. Normally, my rule of thumb is you leave a beer a minimum of 10 days, if not 2 weeks, in the fermenter. Another 2 weeks in the bottles at room temperature, and then another 2 weeks in a cool place. But this is just so clean now, it's ready to drink as soon as it's carved. And I found the reason, and it's in this book. It came this week. It's called Historical Brewing Techniques, The Lost Art of Farmhouse Brewing, and it's written by a Norwegian guy. Now don't forget, Kveik is a Norwegian farmhouse yeast. And he spent a lot of time, over a decade, researching farmhouse styles in Norway and actually all of Scandinavia and the Nordic countries. He even mentions North Scotland, Latvia, Lithuania. He's been around, he's talked to isolated, remote farmers, and he's learnt their techniques because he fears that it's a dying art and he wants to preserve it. This is what he says on page 270. And I might do a review of this book as well because it's thoroughly absorbing. They make excellent beers, he says, but at the same time they break every single rule in the book that we as brewers, believe are sacrosanct. They don't care. But this is what he says on page 270 about this issue about just the beer being perfectly ready to drink straight away. He talks about the practical benefits of using Kveik, and one is, of course, you can increase the metabolism of the yeast by brewing at high temperatures. So it can rip through a beer in just a few days. But he goes on to say, another benefit is that beer fermented with Kveik has little need for maturation. So the beer really can be drunk 48 hours after pitching, or in my case, 4 days. Some brewers think the beer is at its best then, while others think it is at its best a week or two later. and I think I know what the reason for that is. The reason seems to be that not much is produced in the way of off flavours like diacetyl, so the yeast does not need much time to clean up afterward. It is perfectly, this is interesting, it is perfectly possible to release a commercial Kveik, so in a bottle on the shelves, 1 week after pitching, and some commercial breweries have done just that. Note that this also applies when fermenting cider. I have been able to make fine cider with Kveik in 10 days. That's the reason. I don't know if you know, but when yeast is fermenting, it's not just converting sugar to alcohol or ethanol, to be more precise. There's lots and lots of other compounds being formed. Phenol alcohols, diacetyl, and they all give a peculiar taste to the beer, what I think we generally call homebrew twang. That homebrewy taste, I think a lot of the time it's because homebrewers haven't left the beer long enough and haven't allowed the yeast to clean up, because yeast will clean up all of that stuff and just leave a really nice tasting beer. When you're using a conventional yeast like Nottingham ale yeast, that can take about 6 weeks and then maybe another month on top of that, just until it's coming into its prime. So you're looking at 2 to 3 months. Because you don't have all the diacetyl and the different compounds, it's ready to drink straight away as soon as it's carved. That's the reason. So yeah, I can't tell you how clean this beer tastes. So I think I'm on track. I think I'm really on track to be taste testing this on Sunday. I'm bottling tonight. I'm going to keep them in a very warm environment, so should only be another couple of days for carving, maybe 3 days, but still that's in Saturday. And then as soon as they're carved, they are ready to drink. You don't need to leave them waiting any longer. Just need to put them in the fridge, job's done, finished. It's an amazing yeast. It's an amazing yeast, and in fact I'm really interested now in learning more about them, and this book is ideal as an introduction. It's very concise and very dense with information, but he explains it in a very interesting way. It's almost like a travel log about his journeys, visiting all these isolated farms and talking to brewers. So we'll have to wait and see on Sunday. If not, I'll be doing the American IPA, because this is a cracking beer as well. And I'll also be telling you about something else I've purchased, but you'll have to wait till Sunday. So thanks for watching. That's my Kveik update. Things are going great. It was just that mix up with the temperature right at the start that I think I've put an extra day on. Otherwise it could have been in the bottles now and it could have been halfway to carbonation. I could have been drinking it Friday night. So, but you live and learn. You live and learn. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on Sunday for a taste test of either the Kveik or the American IPA. Bye bye for now.